Hey, thank you to everybody out there in the Zoom land. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar on shared services. I'm Leslie Wallach, NARC Executive Director. National Association of Regional Councils is delighted to bring you all a webinar on topics unique to regional organizations as you continue to find ways to support your communities by reducing costs and administrative burdens. Today, we are most delighted to have Lyle Wray, Executive Director Emeritus, and Pauline Yoder, Acting Executive Director of the Capital Regional Council of Governments, CRCOG, on the whys, whats, and hows of establishing a region-wide shared services program. Lyle and Pauline will discuss why there is a need for a shared services program, why they developed one in Hartford, Connecticut, in the Hartford, Connecticut region, what services were and were not included in the program, and how it was implemented. Before turning the program over to Lyle and Pauline, I'm just going to share a little bit of their extensive bios with you. Since 2004, Lyle Wray has served as Executive Director of the Capital Region Council of Governments until he semi-retired in August of this year, and now serves as Executive Director Emeritus. Before joining CRCOG, Lyle served as Executive Director of the Ventura County Civic Alliance. He's also served as Executive Director of the Citizens League in the Twin Cities area. And before that, he was the Dakota County, Minnesota Administrator and Human Services Director for 7 years, also in the Twin Cities area. Originally from Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. We'd like to hear more about that, Lyle. He earned a doctorate degree in psychology from the University of Manitoba in 1980. He has had a variety of international teaching and consulting experiences in e-government, performance measurement, civil society, and human services. He co-authored the book Results That Matter and was elected as a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration in 2015 and elected as president of the Community Indicators Consortium in 2017. International travel, Vienna and Budapest most recently, are his main hobby in addition to reading, nonfiction, and fiction. Most of all, we want to thank Lyle for his dedication to NARC and his fellow regional members for your leadership on so many critical issues, your service to NARC, and your regional peers across the nation. Lyle has served on NARC's Executive Directors Council for many years, sharing his wisdom, innovative practices of CRCOG with his peers. His dedication to all issues local and his continued search for new opportunities to serve CRCOG and his national colleagues is most appreciated. We wish him the best and thank you for all you've done. All right, and Pauline. Pauline Yoder is the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Municipal Services and the current Acting Executive Director at CRCOG. Municipal Service Department at CRCOG is responsible for the Capital Region Purchasing Council, the CRCOG IT Services Cooperative, and Municipal Service and Sharing Programs. In addition to directing the Municipal Services Department, Pauline has been active in helping towns with the crumbling foundations issue and other internal and external projects at CRCOG. Prior to CRCOG, Pauline has worked at the Hartford Insurance Group in finance with various responsibilities, including vendor management, outsourcing, and strategic analysis. Pauline has a BA from Wesleyan University and an MBA in finance and strategy from the Dale University School of Management. Pauline is a diehard Patriots fan, but originally hails from Packer country. She and her husband, Sherwin, and 3 children, John, Jennifer, and Rebecca, love to travel and ski. I'm going to give you one last housekeeping matter before I can turn it over to Lyle and Pauline. There'll be time at the end of the presentation to ask questions and comment on what you've learned. Please, at the bottom of the screen, there is an icon with the letters Q&A. Please, at any time, feel free to enter your questions and comments. With that, I'm going to turn this over to the two of you, and thank you so much.
Good. All righty. Can I advance these, or are you going to do them?
No, I'm driving it, Lyle.
Very good. All right, we're going to talk about regional shared services. This is Pauline's backdrop here, and this is the downtown Hartford United Healthcare. Next slide.
If I can advance it.
Here we go. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today, the CROG background and history, the issues of situational assessment. One of the things I think we'll try to get across today is one size does not fit all in terms of shared services and regions. And so the situational assessment is a big issue. We can talk about the initial programs that the capital region started with, how we selected opportunities and continue to do that, the implementation of shared services in the region. I think we have some tips on that, if not battle scars, maybe a little of both. The current service offerings we have, recently launched offerings and future offerings, and then a few suggested takeaways from today. So just a little background on CROG, maybe not the world's best acronym, but it's what we got. We have 38 towns, and there's almost 1 million people exactly in our region. The two historic regions of capital region are made up of two historic counties, I should say, of counties, Hartford and Holland, and our bigger cities are Hartford and New Britain. The first example of a shared services, the Capital Region Purchasing Council, which is still very vigorous, was formed in 1970. And it was a very helpful tool for towns to bid commodities together that were not covered under state contracts or other opportunities. And any municipality in the state of Connecticut can be a member. What's our non-CROG membership these days, Pauline? Quite a few.
I think it's 70 non-CROG members.
And I think you'll find this is a trend, which is CROG is not greedy. A lot of our shared services are open statewide to towns, so we're not super particular about folks being members. Capital Region Emergency Planning Council is formed. This is a very important aspect for police and fire. Then we did a mobile data dispatch, which is the communication system on the hump of the police cars. It's called Captain. That is sort of going away, but it was very, very good for 25 years. And then last but not least are the Homeland Security and regional programs. After 9/11, CROG got very active on a variety of aspects of Homeland Security and regional efforts. So we have a regional bomb squad, a regional SWAT team, a regional dive squad, and we do a lot of Homeland Security preparedness. One of our more recent exercises was dealing with a terrorist attack on a large shopping center. Unfortunately, we have to do these things, but we're doing a lot of work to be prepared for potential criminal or terrorist activities here. Next slide. I think this is you, Pauline.
Excuse me, I got a cough. So in terms of the CROG's situation, so Connecticut is unique in the nation in that I think between Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we're the only states that don't have counties. And that was since 1960. All of our cities are would be considered larger towns in most other areas. They're all less than 130,000 population. And there weren't any regional services and no regions to deliver the services or county government where we could share services. And also, as always in all of these things, with lots of opinions and diverging attitudes towards regional projects and the benefits of regional projects.
So oh, is this mine or yours? Go ahead.
I'll go, and then you have the next two slides.
All right.
So, I mean, the real question with sharing is why do you share? Why bother? And there's some very basic reasons. You build capacity, you make yourself more efficient. A lot of the times, the back office becomes a lot more productive with being able to either share resources, share people, and you raise citizen expectations. I think the best example of this is our regional online permitting program, where people can now apply for permits online. Not in my town, but in all the towns that are participating in our regional online permitting program. And that is something that saves lots of time for citizens and contractors. And the biggest question we get from contractors is, why aren't more towns on this? They can do their work during the day, apply for the permits in the evening, or have an administrative assistant do it, so that it simplifies it and makes it more easy for them. And of course, there's always the cost aspect, either lowering the shared capital costs or lowering the ongoing operating costs. And finally, it helps you in a disaster to be able to be up and running. If you're sharing something, you could be up and running in a different place the next day, or more efficiently, more quickly.
So the birth of shared services, we had a conference that CROG encouraged the state to do, and we partnered with the Office of Policy Management, and we held a regional performance incentive, a regional conference, 15 years ago, and began to talk about the possibilities of expanding the shared services in the state. This somewhat directly led to the Regional Performance Incentive Program that was passed finally in 2008, which were incentive programs for regions and towns to adopt these shared services programs. So it started out with a conference that led to legislative interest and others, and we got the Regional Performance Incentive Program in place in 2008. CROG has been rather greedy in Connecticut on getting these programs. We've got $8 million in shared service grants for online building permitting, for regional animal shelters, for geographic information systems, statewide flight, regional trails projects, and then for upgrading the police mobile data display system. So the birth of shared services started, again, it was going on since 1970, but ramping it up started with the Shared Services Conference and then the state program to provide financial incentives. So this is my favorite slide that Pauline knows I had to go through, right? One of the things we did with one of the regional performance incentive grants was to set up a service cloud in two parts of the state, one in the west and one in the east. And we were sort of ahead of our time, but the idea was to have a server to serve the state with software and data storage. And this was pretty far ahead, 10 to 15 years ago. And the upshot of that is there's a whole raft of things you can do with cloud services. The first thing is CROG online storage is roughly half the price of Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, which is pretty amazing. We have relatively teeny data storage capacity, and it's still half the price. So that's a very important part. The second thing is this is available to every town in the state. So one of the aspects is the service cloud, where the data is stored locally. It's not offshore somewhere, and it has a lot of current and future potential. So let's just go over some of them. One of the things we can do with that is we can replace local servers. It's on the second to left column there, if you can see it. Many times we had very small towns, as Pauline mentioned, and if you're in a town like that, you had very small antiquated servers in the basement with the IT department made up of a person jiggling wires and hoping it worked. And we now can basically wipe out all that stuff altogether, which we did ourselves. CROG got rid of our own servers and used the cloud. When we first started this, the cloud was still coming into its own. Now it's sort of the way to go for a lot of this stuff. So replacing local servers, much more reliable, with very ambitious security systems. We've had hackings, but I don't think anything has been hacked at all on our Nutmeg servers at all. Towns have been hacked, but none of our stuff, to my knowledge. So just to give you we'll talk about this in a bit. On the right-hand side, we have the kind of things that are coming now. And basically, we got into this very early, but now we have software and platform as a service. Let me just give you one example. Right now, you don't actually need much of a computer. You can get an extremely basic computer and run it as a software service from Microsoft, and you can instantly be up and running like in 5 minutes. So it's an extremely useful tool, and software as a service means you can rent it instead of having to buy it at a very high cost. So we have a human resources portal, we have electronic document management, the customer relationship side is very important. We put out a bid for our IT partner, and at that time it was called the Connecticut Center of Advanced Technology. Now Novus won the bid. So we've had a strong IT partner that we've got to know well, and they're sort of our go-to solution for IT, which has been very, very important again for us. Voice over internet phone system, again, when we got started on this, was pretty unusual, not anymore. Hosted services are, again, about to explode again with services like Office and general computer systems are going to be largely hosted in the cloud. Streaming video, we'll talk about a little later, is a different kind of story where the technology got ahead of us. We will talk a bit about that. So just to conclude, the flexibility of the cloud solution allows for new ideas and customized solutions very quickly. And so in many cases, we can move very quickly on things, whether, I know Paulina's favorite topic here, but testing whether or not we have crumbling foundations and giving people money for testing. We can set up software pretty quickly to do these things. So next slide.
All right, so how do you select an opportunity? The primary things that you need to look at in selecting an opportunity is there are three sort of, you see it on the three axes. What's the cost to start up? What are implementation challenges is what I would call barriers to entry that are not related to costs. So you have the political, usually political barriers, and then what's the potential savings? So if you look on this chart, this is something that we did a number of years ago through a study, and this is where we were with that. So property assessment, it's cheap to start up, but boy, there are some barriers to entry. There are some political challenges that might be insurmountable. So, and the savings is decent, not great, but not too shabby. Electronic document management system, which is something that we started, has mid-range in terms of startup costs, but huge savings, low political challenges, and so that is probably a good sweet spot to have, as well as information technology. And you see, finance, you've got, potential savings are not very high, but and the challenges are high. Those aren't political challenges; they're just implementation challenges in terms of it'll take 18 months to implement that. So there's a long tail in implementing that change, and the savings are meh. So that's not probably something that you would want to tackle, especially to start off with. So you sort of assess where people are, what the potential for savings are, and then decide on the project that will give you the most bang for your buck, and frankly would be the easiest to implement. So a good example is procurement. Low cost to start up, low implementation challenge. We're doing it, and it's giving some benefit to the towns, but it is a benefit that they're seeing.
You want to handle this one?
Sure. So how do you implement? This is sort of the first phase of implementation. These are the steps that you need in terms of implementing a program. You have to start with what you can handle, right? We start with a pilot group, always with a pilot group of towns. They have to be willing participants. You have to have top level buy-in. So if the department head wants it, but the mayor or the town council or someone is against it, then it's DOA for that town. for that municipality. You can't move forward with that municipality because there's not enough buy-in, and because it's not always easy, and there'll be challenges. We also look for a diverse group. So when we do implementation, we want to look at small and large towns. Sometimes we understand that some of the programs will be more likely to be used by by a certain set of towns, just because of the nature of the program. But we want to understand where people's needs are with regards to that, so that we have that understanding through the pilot group. Needs assessment. So that's fairly straightforward. And I would say that it's a constant feedback loop, right? It's a constant on, okay, this is working, this is not working. We need updates here. This is working for us. This is not working for us. This area needs improvement. You have to have that constant communication with the pilot group, and assuming that it goes well, and that it's favorable, and it's that you get to a point where it's successful for people. Then you move into a into a sort of a program expansion where you open up opportunities. So you have the pilot group, and then you say, if towns want to join, here are the benefits of joining. Here's what you get. Here's how much the cost is. And you begin the marketing and demonstration of whatever the services would be. So that would be.
Could I just add, I know this topic is so important it chokes you up, Pauline, but just to add a point about the implementation is the amount of support that some communities needs is staggering. So Pauline's predecessor, I'm thinking about Jocelyn Matheson now, spent a great deal of her time on the road getting online building permitting launched in our pilot group. And so don't underestimate the implementation, particularly when it's the first kind of program of its type. So we went from communities that had very, very little IT to a state-of-the-art, very sophisticated pilot program for online building permitting. So they went from literally paper and pencil to online cloud-based systems that had tracking and dashboards in it. And that leap was very, very labor intensive. So that's a point to keep in mind. In other words, just because you have that top technology and one of your communities says, let's go for it, doesn't mean you're done. And you're going to be looked to for hand-holding and support, depending on the topic, particularly when it's new. So I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Pauline, but I think it's very significant.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That and some of implementations, especially when you're doing it, when you're sharing it, may require people to change their processes. So one of the towns, Regional Online Permitting is a great example. That paper-based town actually had the payment for the permit clipped to the application while it went through the approval process. So it would go to the building department with the check attached. It would go to the fire department with the check attached. And once everyone had approved it, they would deposit the check. So within our system, you have to pay upfront once it calculates your permit fee. And at first the town was against that because they said, well, this isn't the way we've always done things. And so there was a little bit of working through those sort of challenges in terms of you may need your way may not be the most efficient, or you may have to adapt some of the way you do things to be able to take advantage of a regional program. And sometimes you can overcome that, as that town did, and is a heavy user of the online permitting now. And sometimes if a town is set in its way that says, this is the way we've always done things, this is the way we'll always do things, then it might not be the best fit. And that's something that we have to recognize.
Yep. And I think one of the things about that is going from communities that have had virtually no advanced IT systems. I think the first ones are harder. I think it's probably an easier sell now that they've had experience with online building permitting or HR portals, they understand how it works. So one more new system on top of that is less difficult than starting from scratch. So I think that's just a thought I had.
Yeah, and I would say that attitudes towards that is changing as well from the customer side, right? 10, 15 years ago, online building permitting was a new thing. It was not something that people expected to be able to do in town. They themselves couldn't navigate the internet. But now the expectation is, why can't I do it online? I should be able to do it online. And so there's some changing expectations from the customer side as well.
Yep.
So this is actually the example of the online permitting. Is we started with a pilot group, 6 towns. And as I said, there was a diverse group of towns. And in the needs assessment, we had to take all the various existing processes and to create, at least at a base level, some sort of consistency. We allow for some level of customization, but there is a level set of consistency across the board, especially at the beginning. Once you have experience in the program, you get to understand where you can customize further or allow towns to customize further or be able to develop a more flexible system. But at the beginning, especially when dealing with programmers and tech guys, you have to have a unified consistency, or else they're just going to be overwhelmed by one town asking, well, I want X, and the other town asking, well, I want Y, and they might be mutually exclusive. So you have to come to that understanding, that base understanding. And then, what's working, what's lacking, what can change, what can't change, and moving through that evaluation process, that constant feedback loop. And then program expansion. We're now up to 50 towns in the regional online permitting program, which is, I think, pretty cool, which is almost a third of Connecticut. I think population-wise, we might be over a third of Connecticut.
Right. Want me to do this one?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things we've talked about here is that technology, which is you can get overtaken by technology. So we had the second example is a good one. So we wanted to have video streaming and storage of public meetings. So this is pretty elaborate when we started doing this 10 to 15 years ago. And even in the middle of this process, Facebook Live and YouTube Live and others came about for virtually nothing. So we were going to this, hair-pulling exercise of trying to get towns to organize their meetings for video streaming and then video storage that the public could access. And now you simply set up a YouTube channel and call it a day. So one of the things you have to be aware of is new technology can either make something you're doing obsolete or give you new tools. And so online permitting, for example, when we started doing that in 2008, now we have online field iPads. So people out in the field can do things directly. I don't know if anybody's on this call from Arlington County, Virginia, but Arlington County does overflights of GIS and actually looks at the first draft of expansions to your home come up in an AI system, which is a little creepy in some people's views. But the point is, changing technology means you're going to have to adapt. And but again, we got skunked by YouTube and Facebook Live, basically driving the technology cost to zero for us. So we just have to keep an eye on changing technologies and be ready to adapt.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the regional online permitting program, because when we started out in 2008, for those of you know who IT, it was a client server product. So it was, you had to be connected to the internet in order for the building official to be able to upload the information. They could technically be in the field, but it was very clunky. And then in 2010, you get nowadays, you actually with our online permitting program, the building official can do all of their inspections on their phone. So they can go in, they usually use iPads or some sort of pads because they're a little slightly bigger and easier to see, but they could do it on their phone if they needed to, and answer all the questions, yes, no, this passes, this doesn't pass. And that was not something that was even thought of at the time that we did the initial RFP. I mean, it didn't exist. I mean, iPads existed, but that technology of being able to be out in the field with 4G and LTE, all of that wasn't there yet. And so, but we adapted, and the vendors adapted very well as well. So I've talked a lot about current service offerings, about the regional online permitting program. We also have cybersecurity and infrastructure services. So this is assessment, understanding of, now I hope Lyle didn't jinx us by saying we haven't had an attack, but we offer it to the towns as well, to say, looking at your overall cybersecurity, where you are, assessing where you are, where your needs are, where your vulnerabilities are, and helping you fix that if you wanted to. We have voice over IP phone services. You know, those of you know, I think more people understand this technology now that we're living in a post-COVID world, of being able to take your phone home, or your office phone home, and we use this at our offices, where if people wanted to, if people working from home had their office phone at home, so that they wouldn't have to be using their personal phone to make business calls, and the person answering the phone would see their direct line, and it would be as if they were calling from the office. And we have the fiber optic infrastructure services, the municipal data center, which Lyle talked about, and of course our 50+ year Capital Region Purchasing Council.
Just let me add a point before you, whoops, can you pop that back? With the passage of the $1.2 trillion federal infrastructure bill, we have a contract for fiber optic infrastructure services that's about half the price. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Pauline, about half the price of the state contract for this. So we actually have capacity to move quickly on fiber at a very good rate, which is another one of those things, because getting all of our town buildings wired up and providing that kind of facility has become an important part of expanding shared services, because so much of it's electronically based. But having a fiber optic infrastructure service availability at a good price has been important, but now it could get extremely important. So I just wanted to add that note.
Great, thank you, Lyle. Some recent offerings is the salary survey for state municipalities. So that is just an understanding of where, it's straightforward, it's a salary survey. We also have the HR portal with model and sample documents, sample job descriptions, interview panel directory. We've had a lot of towns that have had challenges in filling their interview panels when they're hiring someone. These days, I think it's a challenge just hiring people across the board. However, just finding people who would be willing to serve on an interview panels was always something that we heard with regards to challenges that people were facing. Human resources consultant and electronic document management system are some of the ones that we've recently launched in the last couple of years. Lyle, do you want to take this?
Sure, I can do that. So going forward, the recent ARPA funding and support for towns is, I think, in process. But since we put these slides together, the passage of the federal infrastructure bill with the broadband infrastructure elements of that, I think there's going to be a lot more potential. And again, a big chunk of this is, what have we got out of our 38 towns, like 37 have internet connection, or advanced internet connection.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
So I forgot to mention this, we didn't mention the Nutmeg Network itself. We have a very high-speed private network that we use. So we're not on the regular internet at all. It's a private network that was the original education network for the state, and many states have this. But we finally clawed our way onto the access for the Nutmeg Network. But now with additional support for communities to expand to all their offices and to add towns that are not actively using very high-speed internet, both the ARPA and the infrastructure bill can be very, very helpful for that. Job application and integration portal in process. My view is that the whole human resources world has a tremendous amount of potential for adding services. There's just so many pieces in terms of screening applicants all the way through onboarding and a variety of other things we can do a lot more of. And again, the projects to leverage the municipal cloud. One of the things we haven't talked about here is sort of the disaster recovery and resilience. The image here is that if a town hall burns down, you go to a disaster recovery area and flip a switch, and the next day you're operating again with the same software, the same phones, the same phone numbers. That's sort of a very, very different issue than when I started out in the IT world. The IT people had the backup tapes in their trunk of their car. I am not joking. We've come a long way with redundancy, and disaster recovery can be a major advantage here. And then the software as a service opportunities are endless. You can have what they call virtualized desktop computers. You can have sort of state-of-the-art, very fancy desktops on a $100 box on your desk that's always updated in software and always with advanced security. So there's some tremendously exciting opportunities that, again, a lot of the stuff you've heard us talk about is IT related, but not everything is. But IT facilitated or enabled, I think is another way of putting it, coming in the future. And again, finishing up wiring our towns and schools and getting broadband in our urban deserts and rural areas is going to be a very exciting aspect we may have some role in. So I can talk about some takeaways, and Pauline, feel free to add a few in. I've mentioned this before because I couldn't help myself. It often takes an awful lot of support to implement change. Starting from zero, it's very, very hard. You can't just sort of, drop the box off in the front door, front steps and say, have a nice day. So that's a very important point. The second one is actually kind of a subtle thing for wonks, and that is it's often difficult to measure the benefits because we don't have detailed cost baselines. Just as something as simple as online building permitting might have 4 or 5 different departments. And we don't really have activity-based costing for those of you who are in the accounting world. So knowing exactly how much money you save by doing online permitting is a problem because we don't know how much it costs now. So no baseline equals no savings measurement. And so that's often a challenge. We know it's enormously efficient and saves a lot of money, but in terms of getting to a specific quantitative analysis, many times we don't have anything remotely close to activity-based costing. I'm not sure we can afford it or want to do it either, but oftentimes it's difficult to measure benefits. Evaluation, technology changes very quickly, and it's about to accelerate. For those of you who are wonky, 5G is coming in the next few years. I actually have a 5G phone, not that you use it much, and I was in Jersey City a few weeks ago, and I downloaded a software update on my phone, and it was like 2 seconds. So the ability of phone systems with 5G to do things like online permitting with tablets, public meetings, a whole raft of things become possible with 5G capacity. You can use wireless phone-based or simply wireless cameras. So the technology keeps going. The cloud and the software as a service are all moving very, very quickly. And I think the pilot testing is a very important point of getting the bugs out. In other words, fail small, scale up well, rather than failing really big. And this goes back to the health.gov, if you remember President Obama's ill-fated launch of a generally disastrous software system for the biggest keynote of his administration, and they hadn't tested it. It didn't work. Oops. So you really want to scale things up after you've got the bugs out of it, and make sure you have it working really well, and then fitting the capacity for shared services to the needs of our community. So it's very much a the needs and preferences driven system. It's not Lyle and Pauline show where we're jamming things down people's throats. We're trying to solve problems they've identified. And in the COVID pandemic world, they were asking about, how to run hybrid meetings or doing more online IT work. So you try to respond to what they want rather than what we're selling, although there's a little bit of marketing in there too, which is just part of the game. So those are some of the takeaways, and we'll look forward to some of your questions. Pauline, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so. But I think that's it is. I think the changing technology has been the big hallmark, especially of the last couple of years. I'm going to take one of these. The last question that was asked first, if that's okay, is the question was how are all these services paid for? Is it through dues or to CROG, or based on usage size or cost and spread all members? So it is based on all of our programs. Once they go into program phase, I would say a year into program phase, have to be self-sufficient. That is our goal. And so they're paid for by the participating towns. So this is one of the things of Lyle mentioning. We have to have willing participants because we can't force people to use it. We're not the state. We're a voluntary organization, and so they have to find value in it. So regional online permitting program, it is that each town pays for their share of what they're using in that. This is true of actually of all of our programs, and we depending on the program, we might structure those costs differently based on the needs and ability to pay sometimes. But the program has to be self-sustaining.
Yeah. I can answer a question. If you're just starting out, where would you suggest we begin on shared services? I think you start with things where there's interest. A good example of that was some of our communities were very, very concerned about animal shelters and sharing animal shelters among towns. And we built a lot of animal shelters to begin with because there was a lot of interest. So that was an interest of communities and shared services. So I think part of this is you go where the interest is. Again, that doesn't mean we don't try to sell them something in terms of marketing ideas, but we do respond to where they're at. And again, Pauline knows this is my favorite example, but we do not have a consensus on 911 consolidated dispatch in this region. My evil twin would like to do 2 911 call centers for the region, and I've been told several times to go back to my room and not come out. So you've got to follow the interest. They don't want to go there. I've tried. I've got the spoon halfway down their throat, but they coughed it up. So it's dynamic. Mostly you follow the needs and expressed interest. Sometimes you try to sell a little bit, and then you're sent back to your room. So that's sort of what that is.
In terms of political challenges, the PSAP challenge was way up here. So
yep.
Anyhow,
I think the payback would be good. It's fairly technological, but the real thing is political opposition.
Yeah. Additional questions.
So you want to talk about the types of software available through
yeah, so primarily right now we have it's software as a service. Right now our regional online permitting program is software as a service, and we're working on EDMS. That is it is close to go live. I would say it's as close to go live as we can make it, but it's we're not expanding right now. We'll be expanding in the spring to open that up, and we're open in terms of what the next thing is with regards to that. I would say that the job application portal is definitely going to be a software as a service model in terms of the town's usage of that, and we take it from there.
I just add one thing. I think the virtualized desktop, which sounds science fiction and far away again, is you can have a very, very minimal monitor, a keyboard in a small box, and have instantly updated full computing function. That dramatically saves money. Again, if you're a small to medium-sized city, many times there's an IT person wandering around jiggling wires, putting in new versions of software, and it doesn't work very well. So a virtualized desktop, everything is up to date right away, and you can sort of do that with Microsoft or Google now. And it's coming very quickly. I think that you just simply get rid of that. So the cloud started with big server replacements. I think it's going to go all the way down to desktop replacements and save a lot of money. And again, not having the people, the IT technicians wandering around. I mean, I spent a lot of time in government where, literally IT people are wandering around with a briefcase full of software updates. Now you just turn it on. I mean, if you ever used a Chromebook laptop, you turn it off and turn it on and it's updated. That's what this is. That's exactly what a virtualized desktop is. And if you own a Chromebook, it's pretty much what it is. So anyway, I couldn't resist that.
So there's a question on, do you have any advice on overcoming political resistance?
Yeah, retire.
Well, this is a tough one, right? So there has to be I would say that there has to be an agent for change within the organization, at least one agent for change within the town. So, online building permitting is a great example. We had one town where there was the town planner really wanted online permitting, but the people who worked for him were kind of like, we like our paper. We like doing the things that we've always done. And so you have to have somebody who's championing it for you on one level, and you have to be able to demonstrate the benefits of it. I think that town right now would not go back to doing the way they used to do it. But it takes time. And I don't know, Lyle, if you have other thoughts.
Well, I think Pauline's points are exactly right. I think there's a certain amount of selling in this. Some of the success and opportunity, I think, is there. You still have to respond to, towns' interests and needs, but you can sell them on why you don't want to have a server in your basement with the guy jiggling wires. I mean, you can sell why you want to move to the 21st century. You still have to respond to their needs, but there's a little bit of selling going on with this. And I think the virtualized desktop is next. So no servers and no real desktops in your operation, and off you go. It just gets stuff out of your hair. Again, we started out with the cloud server for municipal services before the jury was really in on cloud-based services in terms of security. And again, I think if you look at, yes, there are occasional hacks of really big systems, but most of the time it's very small systems. The big ones are much more secure than the little ones. And so that's another sales point is cybersecurity, which is a critical aspect. But those are the main points. I think it's the marketing, I think, is an honest part of what we have to do too, rather than just sort of sitting in our office waiting for the phone to ring. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't overcome the political resistance, right? The public safety answering points is a great example. That is not going to come about through willing participants. Are there huge benefits to it? Lyle and I both believe there are huge benefits to it. You'll have better service. You'll have, the best example that I have is during we had tornadoes, or they weren't called tornadoes, they were microbursts a few years ago, and we had a number of towns who 911 calls never went answered. There were I wouldn't want to say there was an area where 1,000 911 calls didn't get answered because they rolled over into somebody who was a mutual support place, but then they couldn't answer, so it rolled over, and finally the person gave up. And so a regional PSAP would have had the capacity to handle that, but that benefit is not something that the political resistance to it, of liking to have the 2 dispatch people in the basement of your police department has been very insurmountable. So sometimes you can't.
Yep.
I
guess the particular struggles we could share, I think one of them is the state funding has been up and down. Is that a good way to say it, Pauline?
Yeah.
So we can't count on a reasonable level of state support. So we have to we did do our own regional fund. So we set aside money on our own for a regional innovation fund. So we kind of somewhat took the law into our own hands by setting up a funding source on our own to stabilize and invest in future opportunities. But the state's contribution has been up and down. Is that fair? So I think that's getting continuous investment. Innovation is not a one-time thing where you do it once and then quit. It's a continuous investment. And I think you need to find a way to maintain that continuing investment in innovation on shared services.
And I would say that that's also dovetails a little bit into how do you select those, how do you select the pilot towns? One of the things is we have to have willing participants, right, in terms of the pilot towns, but also we sort of give that as a carrot of if you're a pilot town, you get huge benefits. One, you get to sort of shape the program the way you think it should be. And two, you get a huge discount in your startup costs, you know, because we use the regional funds, we use the state funding to start that initial capital investment, whereas a town that comes along later on might have to put that money in at full price, which still saves them money, but doesn't save them as much money. And in terms of the other selection process, it's willing participants. It's really willing participants, and those who are, and I would say the job portal is a very good example. We've had lots of willing participants, lots of different cities, and we've opened the doors to all of them, but we've limited it also to just CROG towns, because CROG towns are the ones who are funding that initial pilot. Once the pilot goes into program phase, then all the members will be contributing. Anybody participating will be contributing, including the CROG towns, but that initial pilot phase sort of, so we limit it to the people who are sort of footing the bill, if you will.
Right. One other piece I would be remiss if I didn't mention it is the price of information technology, both the software and the hardware, is falling all the time. You know, the price of storing a unit of information or of providing an operating software is collapsing. You know, in a previous life, I was buying software in $750,000 units for a county government. The stuff you could rent now for $1,500 a month online in the software as a service. So the point about it is, I think the barriers technologically are much lower, but that exposes the people barriers and all the other stuff. But the cost of technology barrier is less of an issue than it was, much less of an issue than it was 10, 15 years ago, and it continues to get cheaper all the time. As I said, the cost of storing massive amounts of data. We have our geographic information system data is terabytes of information, and it's almost not worth mentioning how much it costs to store it. So the price points have really fallen down, which is a good point. So the sales pitch is a lot easier when it's much cheaper over time. And I think we're on that the verge again with virtualized desktops and replacing servers with cloud storage. All that stuff has gotten much cheaper. And I think that's just something in our favor as we do shared services. It's getting easier. And the software is getting smarter. So it's less clunky to use. So there's a lot of things that are, I think, in our favor in terms of advancing shared services in the coming years.
Good. I think that's it. I think we answered all the questions. So I'll turn it back to
Leslie. Yep. You're on mute, Leslie.
I'm muted.
That's the slogan of the year. You're on mute.
Yeah, you're muted. Yeah, and when you're not muted is when it's so noisy, right?
Then it's a dog or a lawnmower if you're not muted. So
yes, I knew the mailman already came, so we're good. But thank you so much, Pauline and Lyle. I know we've been hearing about all the innovations you've been doing in shared services for years, and Pauline, Lyle has given you credit as the person he gets to crow about them, but you're the one that's done so many of them. So we really, really appreciate hearing about it, hearing from both of you, and taking all this time to share. This was really informative. We want to thank Lyle again. Congratulations on your semi-retirement. I have a feeling we'll still be hearing lots and lots from you, but we just want to thank you from NARC with everybody who's here, just to say thank you for this. And we look forward to continuing working with you on all this. I have one final housekeeping matter. Before this, I also want to thank Neil Bomberg for putting these together and for being our webinar guru. If you have other ideas, I mean, I think our members are continually innovating, and you can see from here about all the ways that regions are looking for ways to serve their regions. If there are other programs you'd like to hear about from us that we can help bring you new webinars, we are thrilled to do that. So our next webinar will be on Thursday, December 9th, 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll be hosting a webinar on climate extremes and the Great Lakes infrastructure, be presented by our friends at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. This is one in a series we've been doing on too much water, to be followed up by one on not enough water. So information on that will be coming soon. The past series are available on our website. And we look forward to working with you and seeing you all on the next webinar. Lyle and Pauline, a million thanks, and we wish you all a good Thanksgiving. We'll see you in December.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.